Hi there. My name's Gilly, and this is Johnny, and it's a pleasure to share this day with you, and hopefully this view underneath here a bit later. So thank you, Taylor, for putting this on. So, despite appearances of being a cold water swimmer and ice seeker, I'm really a rock climber, and I found myself moving to the Lake District about 10 years ago in search of more rock to climb. In 2012, I had a rock climbing accident. I broke my back in Utah, and with a career in the climbing industry, this move from Bristol, hello Bristol, closer to the water, to this really unique landscape, just felt like a real tonic. But, as you might have noticed, it does rain here quite a lot. So alongside England's highest peaks, there's also 200 bodies of water to swim in. So in a vague desire to take up a new sport that was weatherproof, I headed to the liquid horizontal world. And what I stumbled across that day 9 years ago has definitely changed my life. Fast forward to now, and I'm a swim coach, doing the trials with Heather, work with Johnny, and meditation teacher. And I work with many diverse groups across the UK, helping more people to access the outdoors for mental and physical well-being. So it's a really great honour to chat to you today about what happened with our Blue Mind Men group. Every year since I've moved here, I swim every day in January in a vague attempt to raise money for different mental health charities, whilst profiling the benefits of cold water skin swimming to new audiences, but also how to leave it better and how to stop, pause and take breaths slightly deeper in nature. So the challenge is quite hard to swim every day, especially when you're trying to fit it in with work demands and inclement weather, and also to promote it as a fundraising element. So 3 years ago was no different. I was sitting there going, oh gosh, I don't really want to do this anymore, but it's good fun. And conveniently, my good friend Jonathan had just moved up from London. He's an accomplished winter swimmer. And so I knew that I had a buddy to join me for this endeavour. So how hard can it be? And how could we still make it fun? There's Johnny. So it was how can we do this together, and how can we make it more fun? And we came up with this idea that maybe it might be more fun to sort of look at swimming with different men. 75% of all suicides are male, and men are less likely to access talking therapies, and they do need help. So men's mental health, good or bad, affects everyone. And cold water benefits for men still seem, certainly from our perspective, seem to be sort of missing from a lot of the talk, the media and the literature on the subject, talking about like it's good for women of a certain age, but where are all the men? So the plan that we hatched was simple. It was to swim every day with different men, to capture their stories, and to raise money for a men's suicide charity. And then at the end of the month, to start a men's swimming group. So having worked in the rock climbing world, women's rock climbing world, I knew that role modelling was important. So if you can see it, you can be it. But our plan fell apart spectacularly on day one, because the man who I was planning to swim with was my husband, and he was simply too hungover to join me for that swim. So I found myself standing on a high up tarn looking for a passerby who was male to just get in the water with me on the 1st of January. And fair enough, I managed to find someone. I grabbed a stranger. He got his kit off, and boom, we're in. We're on our mission. But mid-month, we ran out of men to swim with in Cumbria. The word had got out, there were 2 swim coaches looking for all these different men. So we were like, okay, what are we going to do? So we decided that we would head north of the border to Edinburgh. And we joined a group called the Edinburgh Blue Balls. And we infiltrated their ranks. There's me infiltrating their ranks. They are an amazing mental health group of men that swim in the Firth of Forth, and they take Sunday service every Sunday in a very interesting piece of water called the Firth of Forth. overall in the month, we swam with over 150 different men from across the UK. I had a great time. Yeah. Many had never experienced cold water or its magical shrinking properties. We swam with ex-prison officers. We swam with ex-military. We swam with academics, dog walkers, trans men, veterans, artists. We swam in over 20 different bodies of water, high up and low down. We captured their stories on social media to push it out to a wider audience. And as we've already talked about, their stories were powerful, heartwarming, and uplifting. People are really willing to share their stories in water. It's this stripped back nakedness which lets these conversations really flow. For Johnny and I, it was pretty much like swim dating every month, every day for the month. Every morning we'd hop out of bed. Well, we weren't in the same bed. We'd hop out of bed and we would meet a new man to swim with. It was like kit off on the first date. And 67 of them had beards, which was super. So on the last... We also talked about how to swim safely and stuff like that. But on the last day of the month, the men's group was formed, and many of them were the men that we'd swum with when we were doing the month of swimming. And it's been a real great joy to witness this group every Sunday coming down and forming in the water. This degree in temperature drop, sort of changing minds and changing perspectives each time we go in. This ripple effect is still sort of oscillating onwards. This connection to blue spaces on the doorsteps, on our doorsteps and our communities is hugely important to demonstrate how we can all leave it better and how we can share the correct information about how to enter into the outdoors arena with a delicate touch. And crucially, certainly for me anyway, that nature does not belong to us. We are simply part of it, passing through, walking the ancestral path that we must protect. We can all advocate for the environment and become activists. So I'm now going to pass on to Johnny, who's a male man, and he's going to talk more, an actual man, who's going to talk about the impact and what actually happened in the group and then going forward. So thank you very much.
That was awkward. Switch over. Thank you. I guess the question that I get asked the most, and we get asked the most about Blue Mind Men, is why? Like, why a men-only swim group? Surely men don't need encouragement to participate in sport. You might even be thinking, we want to smash the patriarchy, not swim with them. And to be honest, I used to think the same. And ever since I started open water swimming 15 years ago, I've been part of strong swimming communities. So first and foremost, I was a member and committee member of the South London Swimming Club at Tooting-Bec Lido, a cold water swim club with a history of like well over 100 years. And for me, that club is a blueprint of an active, welcoming, supportive and competitive swimming club for men and women. But 15 years ago, the world of open water was very different. Back then, open water was seen either the preserve of channel swimmers or an offshoot of a triathlon. And winter swimming was a niche pursuit done by cranks and oddballs. We swam in cold water because it was fun. There was no talk of mental health benefits. And wild swimming was this newly coined phrase so I used to work at Outdoor Swimmer magazine, what used to be H2 Open magazine, and we were really wary of using the phrase wild swimming because we were open water swimmers, we weren't wild swimmers. But how the situation has changed. So the steady growth of the sport over the past 15 years, it went stratospheric during the pandemic with the rise of wild swimming. And now at the magazine, we're really wary of calling outdoor swimming a sport. So it's become a pastime or a hobby. And that's a really massive change. But I guess the most striking feature of the post-pandemic boom was that it was led by women. And it was driven by mental health benefits of swimming outdoors, not by participation in open water events or races. And then we began to see this really interesting development, this small trend up and down the country of men-only swim groups formed expressly for the mental health benefits of cold water swimming. 5 minutes left. Oh, this is exciting, isn't it? And again, to be honest, I was quite wary of this trend of like men-only groups. And my first experience of this new kind of swim group was with the Edinburgh Blue Balls with Gilly on our January swims. And I felt really nervous. Kind of worried it'd be all like lads, which kind of isn't me. But unlike traditional men-only spaces like pubs or football matches, the group was welcoming, it was inclusive, it was quite diverse, and the express aim was to improve mental health. And I think from that moment, it seemed a desirable goal to create something similar for men in the Lake District. And with Blue Mind Men, we wanted to create a club that was part of the movement to banish that stigma of men talking about their feelings, to improve overall mental health, and to help men establish better social connections in the outdoors. Theoretically, the club is about cold water swimming, but in fact, it's about getting together and having fun. But it does have that express aim of improving mental health. And each swim starts with a circle, so everyone kind of gathers round. Everyone says their name. I think that's really important to introduce yourself. And then if you want to, you can share how you're feeling, like how your week went, if you've got any news you want to share. And that hopefully makes it a welcoming environment and adds to that sense of shared experience and community. And it's usually pretty cheerful, but it does help towards like breaking that myth that masculinity means being strong and resolutely silent. And those weekly Sunday morning swims have had a ripple effect as the club has become more established and more people have joined. And you don't have to swim every week for it to have a positive effect on your life. So we have one founding member, this chap here with a big beard, who always thought he would never, ever get into cold water. And yet, since his first dip, he's barely missed a Sunday in nearly 3 years, and even if he doesn't swim. And he was there on the stage when we were awarded the Ways to Wellbeing Award, so he received that on behalf of the club. And the community has been transformative to his life. We have a father and son whose weekly dips with the group have given them the confidence to take on some swimming challenges over this summer. So they swam the lengths of Coniston and Ullswater. We joined forces with the local outdoors group, the Wonderful Wild Women, these ladies here, to raise funds for Growing Well, a local mental health farming charity. And involvement in the club has also fostered a real sense of protection of the environment we swim in. So whether that's litter picks, beach cleans, clearing the jetties of stones after storms, taking part in the Big Windermere survey, citizen survey science project, or as we saw last week, telling off teenagers for throwing sausages in the lake. So forget about sewage. With the amount of people having barbecues lakeside, sausage pollution really is a massive issue. To sum up, groups such as Blue Mind Men, they're showing that there are new ways for men to connect with each other and with the outdoors. And I guess that's the crux of this discussion, not the number of men swimming outdoors, but the way in which they do it. And while men dominate competitive sports, they also dominate suicide statistics, and that signifies a crisis in masculinity that needs attention. And through cold water and community, we can create safe outdoor spaces for men to meet, talk, and improve their physical and mental well-being. And the ripple effect of that can be transformative for all of us.
Time to spare.
Yeah, time to spare. Thank you.
Thank you. So I had a question. It's picking up on a really small aspect of your talk, but it's one that really resonates with my work. So I'm going to find this really interesting. And that was that you're working with the OSS, and you said briefly that you were really wary of using the word wild, and you're also really wary of using the word sport. Part of my PhD is looking at what is wild about wild swimming. So how is that conceptualised? How is that experienced within the practice or not? And how is outdoor swimming producing wild bodies? So I just wondered if you could comment a little bit more about your resistance to using that term and your thoughts around it.
So it was so Outdoor Swimmer magazine rather than Outdoor Swimming Society. So when I started the magazine like 10 years ago, it was called H2 Open, linked to open water swimming. And wild swimming was definitely like this new term that there was definitely a resistance to using it. I guess because then swimming, it was more of a sport. Whereas definitely nowadays, I think with the amount of people who are dipping, it's kind of, to call it a sport is definitely more of a barrier, like a barrier to participation, a barrier to entry. And lots of people, I guess, don't see themselves as sports people. They're swimming, especially if they're swimming with the mental health benefits. Does that have anything to do with sport? And in terms of like writing about swimming, it's quite difficult. So where do you kind of find that balance? Because obviously some people are swimming the channel and they're very sporty, and some people are going for 2-minute dips. So yeah.
This is a really ill-formed question.
Good.
But men are more likely to go to men-only swimming groups, do you think? Or what's that?
I think
what does that create? Because they then, yeah.
So our group's not men only, to be clear. It's men and friends. And certainly the research that I've had in the rock climbing world, where I've been a big part of, our rock climbing festival had 80% men and 20% women. Because in the rock climbing instructor and professional world, there's 80% men and 20% women. So we flipped it. All the men that came to the rock climbing festival had this completely different experience of swimming with, of climbing with a group of people that normally they would be the dominant gender in. And in the swimming world, when I swam with the Edinburgh Blue Balls, it was a completely different experience for me to see and to listen. And so instead of having these silos of like, that's men only and that's women only, to have this sort of mix. So we have men and friends. So there's women that will come as well. There's only a couple of women each time. But it's nice because then you get this understanding that men struggle the same as women. You know, the men were talking about exactly the same things as the women. And the men that comes to the women's groups, like, feel the same. So there's this tying together of community rather than it being that. Now there's lots of other groups that are strictly men only, but that's more like a sort of held space for a therapeutic thing. But we're not that. We're just a sort of just come along together.
Yeah, I guess if you look at maybe like mental health swims, the majority of their participants are women. And I do think that is a barrier. I mean, it's not a barrier for me, but I do think for some men going to a predominantly female space can be, that can be a barrier. Yeah.
Gilly, could you talk a little bit more about parallels or differences between climbing and cold water swimming?
So it's I get asked this question a lot, and for me, there's so many similarities, not in indoor climbing that you see on the telly and at the Olympics, but outdoor climbing where you're having to understand risk and your balance with nature, and that we're in an environment which is inherently going to have risks, and then being able to balance that with mitigating those risks and understanding you'll never mitigate those risks to zero is really similar. And then understanding that sometimes it's just better to not participate and walk away. So if you're at a sea cliff and there's a raging sea and you know that there's nesting birds, you're just going to walk away even though you had this intention to do it. And that's certainly what we talk about at the lake, and even with the NHS stuff that we've been doing, is like some days you might not want to just, it's about having the understanding that you can just walk away and actually just being in that space, you'll still get something from it, and that's really empowering. So I could talk about that forever, but the things that are similar between climbing and swimming, because I think that there's so many parallels to it, but yeah.